Welcome back. You're watching Hard Copy coming to you from our studios in Abuja. And our guest tonight is Donald Duke, a lawyer and a former governor of Cross River State. Well, just before we went to break, we're talking about some of the proposals of the Southern leaders of thought. I find your proposals very interesting. About 5 of them I find really interesting. You're asking for a new constitution. You're proposing a new constitution. You're also asking that we institute resource control and fiscal federalism and abolish the derivation principle. You also want Nigeria restructured, the territorial structures of the Nigerian federal system restructured in a way that powers will be taken away from the center and given to the present 36 states of the federation or to bigger territorial structures based on regions or zones. Some of your proposals, don't you think this can be done by the National Assembly?
Let me start this way. The National Assembly would have to legislate for a referendum to be carried out. Okay,
they cannot do it by themselves.
You know, our Constitution says we the people. It never worked that way. There was never a national consensus around the Constitution. It was really a Constitution that was put together by a few, albeit under the military, and handed over. A referendum around that, and this is where I may differ a bit from the Southern, from the group. I'm looking at the practical reality around that. I agree with what the speaker said. We need to find a way of working through our representatives. You can't put them aside and deal with the entire country. At the end of the day, they are the representatives. It'll be unconstitutional. That's the law. It'll be unconstitutional to do away with them in this process. So we need to find how we can accommodate them in the process.
It's interesting you say that you have to find a way to accommodate them, but if you look at the proposals, it seems to be really strict in terms of what they're demanding. I also find number 4 proposal interesting. It says 3 main reasons restructuring cannot effectively and meaningfully be done by amendment to the 1999 Constitution, but imperatively requires a new constitution. You also say that it should be adopted by the people at a referendum. Now, when you explain the reasons against constitutional amendment, your group says that the 1999 Constitution is not a democratic one, as you've just explained. Also, the fact that the Constitution was not made by the people constitutes a flaw in it that cannot be cured. Lastly, the Constitution has become largely, if not thoroughly, discredited. It enjoys little respect among Nigerians.
Well,
do you share that view?
That would, regardless of how the Constitution came about, right? It's the operators that would determine whether it enjoys a respect or not. But I'm a realist. You've got to use what you've got to get what you want. I know that it will be practically impossible to effect a restructure without going through the National Assembly. It will not happen. So there's the ideal that has been espoused in that document, but there's a reality. It would start from a meeting of like minds, and when we all agree, and there's a consensus, there's a national consensus, believe me, the National Assembly will have no choice but to flow with the national consensus.
But some people believe that this has just been pushed by a sectional body, such as Southern Leaders of Thought, Southern Leaders Forum, mostly groups from the South, and perhaps the Middle Belt.
And when they meet with other groups in the country, they'll get a national consensus, which will be tabled, which ought to be tabled before the National Assembly. Now, if it is a national consensus, the National Assembly will have to abide by the wishes of the people.
A personal question to you, though.
Go ahead.
Did you respect the Constitution when you swore an oath on it?
To the best of my ability.
Do you still respect it?
I do. It's not perfect. It's a human work. It cannot be perfect. But we must strive to bring meaning to it. Frankly, there's not. You see, if all we need to do is go back to 1963. That's when we had a federal system. Then between 66 and 79, we had the military. And when they handed over a quasi-military state. I don't believe the federal government, for instance, should devolve powers to the states, because the federal government it's a state actually that should relinquish powers to the federal government. So it's the other way. I'm talking about osmosis, right, from the bottom up. And that's what it calls for. In 1963, revenue, for instance, which is really, and most people would not admit it, but that's the most tenuous of all the issues. Revenue was 50% to the regions and 50% to the federal. Today, revenue, on the other hand, it's as if the federal government has devolved 13% to the states. We need to know, for instance, that the country at that time was 4 regions: the south, west, the middle belt, no, not the middle
Midwest.
belt, Midwest, and the east, and so there were 4. Today we're 36 in a federal capital territory, and so we need to make the necessary adjustments to ensure that we all can survive, right, in a union without necessarily shortchanging any of the composite state units. For instance, we talk of derivation on natural resources, but some states contribute vast amounts of money to the federal government, to the federation accounts, not necessarily through natural resources, through taxation and all that. They also ought to get derivation on account of that, because there is wear and tear on the infrastructure of that state to produce that resource. That's not taken account of. So for me, such states are shortchanged. Lagos, for instance. Lagos contributes well over almost 50% or more of our taxable revenue, but gets little or not, gets nothing back in that regard. That's not found Lagos. And in effect, we're shortchanging the entire country, because if the infrastructure of Lagos were improved, I believe more will be generated. So those are some of the issues that, need to be discussed.
Just a little curious, you did say that you're still looking at running for the presidency. Is that still
Well, I did
on
it.
the cards?
I did it before, and it wasn't a flighty endeavor. It was something I thought very deeply about, and the thought still abides with me. But you don't just wake up because you have a desire to be president and just hit the road and print billboards and posters, I want to be president. You've got to also look at the circumstance. Is it realistic? And that's where I am. Is it realistic?
You're still answering that question.
I'm still pondering.
From what you see, what are the possibilities?
It's hazy, but the Hamatan may clear, I don't know.
From the north-south divide and, the unspoken deal
I have
rotation.
never subjected myself to zoning. When I ran for governor, I was not afforded zoning. Everyone and everybody was able to run in Cross River. Besides, it's my constitutional right to run. You can't zone my rights. I think it's unconstitutional to zone. And besides, like I said to you, I was born Nigerian. I wasn't born an Easterner or a Westerner. I was born after independence. So my outlook is Nigerian. And I think...
But if that is the arrangement that people have made, sorry to interrupt your thoughts, in order to, give a semblance of fairness and equity.
We have a constitution. Whatever arrangement you make must be subject to the constitution. I'll tell you something, Mupe. When you're in dire straits medically, you don't care where the doctor comes from, right? I think we're in dire straits right now. We should seek the best amongst us.
Odono Diok, thank you for coming on Hard Copy.
Thank you. I gave you soft answers.
And to you, our viewer, thank you for watching. That's the program tonight. We, however, look forward to hearing from you as Nigeria clocks 57. Are you a satisfied citizen? Share your thoughts with us using the handles on your screen. Thank you again. I'm Maokpe Ogun, wishing you a very happy Independence anniversary.